If I can buy a car and sell it at a break-even cost after 6 months, why not try something new? So I am currently 29 years old and I've owned 40 cars. I'm on my 40th currently right now. It's a insane statement to say, and I think only other people like Ed would maybe be able to somewhat relate. And I think I've been on a crazy trajectory with how the car market has been in the past couple years, and I was able to utilize the market growing. But I guess we can kind of take it back to where it all started. In this 40 cars, growing up, I started first car ever was a Ford F-150. It was red. It was like the dream car that I always wanted. I wanted an old F-150. When I was 16 years old, it was like a 2003 to 2006 is all I wanted. I loved the look of it. So my parents thankfully helped me buy that as my first car and got me that truck. Ultimately, tell the story, I would keep that truck forever, but I didn't because at the time I worked at Dunkin' Donuts and I made $60 a week. And I could not afford the gas in a F-150 because it got 11 miles to the gallon and filling it up cost $85. So I could not afford it and ultimately had to sell it and move on to my next car, which was a Ford Fusion, an older Ford Fusion, which is great. But where my real first love of like cars came in was I bought a 2013 Ford Mustang. And so this is when I was in college. I was working at a car dealership. I started doing some YouTube and I started to be able to, I was like, I want to really get a fun car. And so I got a 6-speed manual Ford Mustang 2013. Being my age and being a Mustang, I couldn't get the V8 because insurance was not going to have that, or I was just not going to be able to afford it. But this really began my love of cars and started modifying it. I did 5 sets of wheels on it, lowered it, exhaust, and all the stuff that you see the Mustangs, and going to Mustang Week where everybody's spinning out and driving off and running into people. Like, it's that whole community. From there, I started to gain some success on YouTube and my work life and balancing things. Once I was able to graduate college and pay that off, I was like, you know what? I really want to really get my first fun car, and got into a BMW M4 2018, first brand new car I ever bought off the showroom floor, and it was a great experience. And then I had that car for probably a year and a half, maybe ish, and I was like, you know what? Channel's doing really well. I want to go for a supercar, let's say. I want to get my first supercar, which at the time was a Nissan GTR. I was like, let's go for a GTR. It's kind of one of those classic YouTuber cars, and God, it did the exhaust and all that. And like I said, my turnaround rate was pretty fast, and it was like a year or less sometimes. And so got the GTR, and this is kind of where the madness started, because the place that I bought the GTR from was a dealership specializing in that. It's called Nexus Racing, I believe, or Nexus Auto Brokers here in Georgia. And the guy who owned the dealership called me. He's like, hey, it's just a personally owned dealership. One guy just deals with a couple cars. He said, hey, I got this Audi R8 coming in. Your car was a great car. It was a 2015 Nissan GTR Black Edition. I'd gladly take that in if you'd want this R8 and maybe, do that. And so at the time, the car market was before the boom. I asked him what the spec was, and it was a Nardo gray with orange accents. It was a 1 of 25. It was called the exclusive edition, and that had my name all over it. Orange is my favorite color, an exclusive edition car. Had a little bit higher miles, but that didn't really bother me because it was somewhat of a newer car. And the MSRP of the car was like $227,000, and I think I purchased it for $150,000. And so that was, you could tell the car market was still kind of lower back then. I bought that car, and it was like my first, I would say, supercar, or it wasn't exotic or anything, but it was a supercar. And right as I bought that is when, right before the car market started to take a shift. And so like I've got a fairly good deal on it. And I had that car for over a year and a half. I had that car and I was daily driving it, actually. And if you know, in Atlanta, an R8's not really a great daily driver, just for the roads and going to the city. And so I added a Ford Raptor to my fleet. And so I matched it. I did Nardo gray with orange accents. So I had those two as my two cars. Then from there, I started meeting car guys and going out and doing these events and all this, and everybody's, driving around in Lamborghinis and stuff. And I was like, a natural progression from an R8's Lamborghini. The Audi dealership locally had a 2015 Huracan 580-2 rear-wheel drive, and they basically had a good price on it. It was $185,000, which at the time I think was a pretty solid deal with 11,000 miles on it. So got out of my dream R8 into a Huracan, and this is that car that I loved. I tracked it. I did all these things. I wrapped it and enjoyed that car a lot. And in the process of that, I had some snafus where I had people holding me up in the car, and having a Lamborghini in the city is just not really a very safe thing. After having that car for about, 8 months, 2 years, it decided to get out of it. And you could tell I'm starting to progressively moved through these cars pretty quick, but I got into a 2018 or 2019 Porsche GT3. This is my first 991.2 GT3, my first Porsche ever. It was like nothing else, the driving experience. And so I had this car, this Porsche GT3, and I was like, this car is amazing, but I've seen what's out there, and the GT3 RS is out there, and that's like the car. And so this specific moment is when the car market shifted, because I purchased that GT3 as a 991.2 GT3 with 1,200 miles, and I paid $150,000 for it. So incredible deal. But I wanted to get a GT3 RS, and I called a dealership, West Coast Exotic Cars out in California. Shout out Hunter, he used to work there. And they had a GT Silver 991.1 GT3 RS for $175,000. And it was like 3,000 miles, crazy deal. And it was like, why not spend another $20,000 and get the GT3 RS? And so where I noticed a shift in the car market was he offered me exactly what I paid for my car, $155,000. And I was like, that's pretty wild, because in these past cars that I bought, I've always lost money. I'm always losing money, losing 10,000, 20,000 here when you're getting these more expensive cars. And so I was like, amazing. I just spent $20,000 and got a GT3 RS, barely any miles on it. That was like such an incredible car. Drove it, tracked it, whatever. From there, that's when the car market boomed. GT3s, GT3 Ss, everything's going crazy. And I get a call from one of my dealers, and they're like, hey, we see your GT3 RS. If you ever want to sell it, let us know. And I was like, money talks. I'm here to sell it. And so ultimately, I ended up, getting an offer of $205,000 on it. And so that's after I paid $175,000 for it. And so I put 3,000 miles on the car 6 months later and made $30,000 on it. And I said, this is different. This is not the normal car market. Something different's going on here. And so once I started to see that, I thought, this might be a good utilization of my connections in the car world, of knowing these dealerships, to start having fun and leveraging those connections to get cars and drive them essentially for free when it really breaks down. And so I started to want to experiment and try everything. If this car market is how it is, I have these connections. If I can buy a car and sell it at a break-even cost after 6 months, why not try something new? And so this is where it was probably 2021 where I went insane. I'm talking like I would have a car for 3 months and get rid of it. Like I got a McLaren 570S, didn't like it. Great, go back to the dealership, offer me exactly what I paid. Actually, after my trade credit, I get more money out of it. And so I started just cycling through and trying everything from McLarens to Lamborghinis to Porsches to everything. In the process, I don't have the exact number, but I do have a car list, which would be funny to send. I have a list of how everything went, but I tried E46 M3s. I started to tap into my childhood love of older BMWs and doing this. And I'll say throughout the process, there was a lot of repeat cars, and specifically to point out one that I have owned 5 different times is a Porsche GT3 RS. I've owned 5 different ones, all different colors, sometimes different years, 4 times the same year, 2016s. There's something about the GT3 RSs that were so good, but something about them where they would hold their value so well that I could always buy one, drive it for 6 months, and sell it back and break even and get into something new. And so I kept going back and forth into that. And so some of the highlights of the cars that I owned were obviously the Huracan Performante, which I've talked about previously, is one of my favorite cars. It was a factory matte orange Orancio Antheus. I had the 580-2, which I tracked, which is an amazing car. Audi R8 was one of my absolute favorite cars. I actually owned 3 of those. I actually bought back my exact one, something that Ed would do. I bought back my exact one twice. And I also did the exact same thing for a Porsche GT3 RS. I bought that back twice. With the original 1 of 25 R8, I was searching one day online because I was going and buying so many cars, and then I saw one pop up with high miles, and I was like, that is my car. I said, that is my car. I ended up reaching out to the guy that owned it, and actually one of Gas Motor Cars here in Georgia, I actually had them facilitate the deal because they had a car that I was going to trade in for it. I bought that car back, and then I bought a paint to sample Porsche GT3 RS. It was signal green. I was told a 1 of 3 factory color. I don't think they really keep a track of PTS colors like that. Maybe they do. I don't have that. I was told by many people as 1 of 3. But then I sold that car ultimately, and I got a call maybe a year and a half, 2 years later from Hunter at West Coast Exotic Cars. He says, hey, I got your green Porsche here. Do you want it? And I said, for the right price, I will. And I actually said no. I turned it down, and then they had it for another like 2 months, and he called me back and he's like, do you want this car? And I said, for the right price. And we worked a deal, and I bought the exact same car back. And so that was the most recent car, was that GT3 RS, the signal green. I actually, in this whole process, I've realized that I went so insane. The car market has now shifted into where it's not as easy to get in and out of cars. You'll lose money if you go on that kind of pace that I was at before, big time. But coming down to this, the current fleet is now I have a BMW individual M3. It's the G80 M3. Custom spec, it's Dakar yellow, which is an homage to the E36 M3, which I love, and currently looking to buy matching E36 to my G80. But then I have a Tesla Model Y. I bought all those cars, and at the peak of it, I think I had 5 or 6 at once in some variations, and then got it down to 3 for a while. But then I finally, with having that GT3 RS recently, I was like, you know what? I want to try to go down to 2 cars and see if I can do that again, because I've experienced these cars. I've driven fast. I've gone the track. I've had fun. Let's see if I can go down to that 2-car model again. 1 car for my wife, 1 car for me. I did it somehow. I feel like that is more of an accomplishment for me than it is buying another car. Like, I can go buy another car right now, but having 2 cars as an accomplishment to me at this point. And so ultimately, me and my wife are planning to build a house here in the next few months. And so I'd rather allocate those funds to that. And then once that's done, I'll go out and buy probably another GT3 RS. I don't know. We'll see.
Successful car purchasing is all about knowing your buying power and being able to move quickly, and the best way to do that is getting pre-qualified with Premier Financial Services. Call one of these numbers, speak to one of their representatives, fill out their application, and then you'll know exactly how much car you can buy. You'll approach a seller, tell them you're already qualified, you've got your simple lease set up from Premier Financial, and you'll be able to close very, very quickly. That's why Premier is one of the most powerful partners in the world of exotic car financing, and that's why I turn to them every time I go out and try to buy something crazy.